Well, Mary, we've finally made it. How are you doing?
I'm doing okay, but I don't like technology.
You don't like tech? I'm looking at the time down the bottom here and it says 3:06. We're only 6 minutes out.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good. Hey, I need to ask you before we get into this, because we're going to be talking about this book here and everything about personalities. And of course, you got personality. And I'm noticing that the colour of this book really matches the colour of your. Is it kind of yellow, or is it just the light that's coming out?
Oh, well, I'm under a strong light here because it's a dark little room that I'm in. It only has one window, and so I've got another light above.
I need to ask you a question before we get going. How do you think, now I'm noticing here at the back too, because I've got here, and we'll introduce you and everything, but I like the pre-talk before we get into it. It says the author, Mary McGuiness, ENFP. So yes. How do ENFPs, how do they go under pressure?
It depends on what the pressure is. If they're doing something they like doing, it's not a problem.
Because the reason I ask is because I put up a message up in here. So I just said we're experiencing a little bit of difficulties and we'll be with you soon, because we were trying to download Chrome, or you were trying to download Chrome, and then we tried Zoom and that didn't work and your speaker didn't work. But how did you think you went under pressure as an ENFP?
Well, when it's that kind of technical stuff that requires a lot of detail, I do get a bit flustered. You know, if it was running a workshop and there are 100 people in the workshop and they all want to talk at the same time, that's no problem. You know, I can handle that. But you know, technology.
Technology, I know, it gets everyone. I've just got a message here from Pub Test and it says, Mary's lighting makes her hair look golden.
Ooh.
Oh, is that a compliment?
Well, I don't know, but
I think it's a compliment. Let's get stuck into this. I'm going to love this little session here because it's got to do about everything with personalities. I don't know if I have a personality. Does everyone have a personality?
Of course you do. You have a personality.
Or is it a characteristic?
Oh, well, characteristics make up the personality.
Because I think that's where
manifestation, if you like, of the personality.
Well, that's where I think maybe the confusion might be, is the confusion that your characteristics make up your personality, or is it your personality makes up your characteristics? And you have to bear with me. I have so many questions because I'm just confused about this whole thing here, and I shouldn't be.
The different characteristics are just a manifestation of some part of your personality.
Explain that in English.
The way you express it, if you like.
Right.
Yeah, in this model, basically, when we talk about personality, but Carl Jung actually described it as psychological types. And what it was about the mental processes that we all use, and which ones do we use easily and efficiently. And so some people are good at technology. They're born that way. They're like that when they're little kids. You know? I wasn't one of those. I can sit and talk ideas until the cows come home. We could sit here for 3 days and talk ideas about personality and I wouldn't get tired.
Because I want to thank you for sending this book in, and I had a bit of a read through it, and I've also in the past I have done my personality profiling, and I think I've changed. And now, is that possible? Because I think in the past, I think from all recollection, I was an ENFP, and I've spoken to people and what's your personality type, and I go, I'm ENFP for sure. And then I did it when you sent me this book, and I thought, hang on a minute, I might be changing a little bit into the I and then maybe a bit of the T. So it could be INTP. But
Well, let me tell you, in this model, basically Jung is saying it's wired into the system. He said it was constitutional. And the research from neuroscience over the last couple of decades is backing up what Jung was saying, that there are different areas of the brain that work really efficiently for certain types and don't work efficiently for other types. So it's wired into the system. So the theory says that your personality doesn't change, but the parts of your personality that are not natural, or the characteristics that are not natural, you tend to develop more in adult life. Or if you're thrown into a job or a family that is different from you, you learn to develop that other side. And so eventually you get a bit more balance in the personality. And so it's quite common for people who are naturally extroverted, as they get older, particularly once they hit midlife, there's often a strong pull to the inner world. And then they're developing some new aspects of the personality. And the people who are more introverted at midlife, they're very often they're fed up with the fact that people are not listening to them or not paying attention to them in meetings or wherever. And they just sort of say, well, I'm going to put myself on a committee. I'm going to, apply for a new job, set up my own business. I want people to take notice. And so the introverts from around about 35 onwards are often trying to put themselves out there to be seen and heard a lot more. And the extroverts are going off doing courses in meditation and yoga because they have worked out that there is an inner world there, but they find it so hard to stay in it. And so, and what I'm saying is that what happens in adult life is that we create a bit of balance in the personality. And this is why if you meet people in their 70s and 80s, if they've developed well, then they can move from one world to another.
Yeah.
And they can appreciate differences in people a lot more than they might have when they were 20 years old because they've developed a bit of that side themselves.
What I want to do is I want to take this down to a level where there may be some people who have no idea what you and I are talking about. They're going, what the hell is she talking about? Introversion, extroversion, more within themselves, out of themselves. I want to show you, which thank you for sending this through, but I want to show you this this psychological types that we have here. Now, can you see that on the screen as well?
Yep, I can see that, yep.
Great. So we've got the and this is based on the work of Carl Gustav Jung, 1875 to 1961. He died in 1961 when I was born. So,
wow.
Yeah, tell me a little bit about Carl Gustav Jung and why he is the master of this thing, and then we'll have a look at a couple of slides.
Okay. Well, Carl Jung was a psychiatrist. His personality was a lot like Albert Einstein, real deep thinker and very creative thinking. And he got interested in trying to understand what makes people tick and particularly what's going on inside. He was actually more interested in the inner world than the outer world because he thought that what's going on inside it affects the way we behave in the outer world. So he was trying, he did a lot of research in the unconscious, in meditation, anything to do with that, trying to understand the whole human psyche. And psychological types was only one little piece of what he did. And he didn't consider it to be all that important back then, but it's turned out it's probably the part of his work that is most well known now. But he was trying to understand, what are these differences in people? He was a psychiatrist who worked one-on-one with people. He didn't run workshops and things like that, or didn't have a questionnaire. He just sat down with people and, they might have come in once a month for years, or they might have come in several times over the period of a month. So he'd spend a lot of time with them, sit down, talk to them, listen to them, and try to work out what was going on inside them, what was the problem they were dealing with. And what he realized was that a lot of their problems were ordinary, everyday problems, usually to do with misunderstanding somebody else's behavior. And somebody was doing something that was upsetting them because they thought this person was trying to get at them in some way or have a go at them or be difficult. And he thought, because he worked so much with his clients and kept copious notes, he realized that what they were doing was misunderstanding the other person's behavior. And he thought, if only they understood that other person's different from them and they see the world differently. They're not trying to get at them, they're just different. And so this is around the time of the First World War. And he thought, well, what are these differences that I'm seeing that people don't see? And so he started going through all his material and trying to work out what were these differences. And extroversion and introversion was the one he came up with first, I suppose because it's the most obvious. You see that as soon as you meet a person. But
let's have a look. Actually, let's have a look at that slide. We'll just have a quick look at that slide so it makes a little bit of sense. And it's got here. The first one here. So this is where he started. This is what you're talking about. So extroversion, introversion. So if somebody's watching this right now, and they're going, "Oh, okay, we're starting to do part of this profile. Where do I sit?" How would you explain this? What's the best way to explain it?
Okay, to start with, it's not about behaviour. Right? This is not a behavior model. This is a cognitive model. And basically what the neuroscientists are telling us is our brains are wired differently and certain parts of the brain deal with the extroversion and certain parts deal with introversion. Now, we all can do both. So when you're sitting at home at night reading a book quietly, you're introverting.
Correct.
When you're talking to me now, you're extroverting. So we can all do that. The question is, which one works best for us? Which one energizes us? So it's all about energy. And so for each person, one of them will energize you and the other one will drain your energy if you do it for too long. Okay, so
can you give me an example of that? Because I'm looking here. Let's have a look at this. Go on.
Yeah. Extroverts focus on the outer world because that's the world that energizes them.
Yeah.
And so they're naturally sociable. They're very often even physically active, or at least interactive, and they will tend to act first and think about it later. Like somebody does something or says something, and straight away they say something. And then they might think, oh, gee, I shouldn't have said that.
Oh, is that the classic foot in mouth disease?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Oh, that's me. That's totally me then.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's classic extroversion. Now, the introverts will tend to reflect first, so they don't put their foot in their mouths very easily, because they will think about it and think about it and think about it, and only when they think they've got the answer will they come out and say something.
Right.
And so, in fact, people can think that they've lost interest because they're busy inside their heads.
Thinking.
It can happen at a staff meeting, for example,
Yeah.
at work. And the extroverts all talking, all lots of ideas. The introverts are sitting there saying nothing. And when they're about to speak, they say, oh, look, I've got an idea about that problem. And somebody says, oh, but hang on, we're down to item 4 now. We've passed that. They've been so busy in their heads trying to sort it out that they haven't been paying attention to the meeting itself.
Are introverts are they also a little bit more of a perfectionist as well, because they're thinking about, oh, hang on, I don't know, I don't want to say this because if I say this,
I don't want to say it until they're pretty sure it's the right answer.
Gotcha.
But certain types can be more of a perfectionist, but it's not just the introversion. But so that's a big difference between the two. So if you're asking somebody an answer to a question, if it's an introvert, they're not going to speak straight away if they haven't thought it through.
Correct.
And so, if you have a staff meeting at work and you dump something on people, say, we have to make a decision right now.
Yeah.
The introvert's going to be really frustrated because they need to go away and think about it and work it out in their heads. The extroverts will talk and talk and talk, and they could end up saying things and changing their minds as they do it.
So are introverts more susceptible to time wasting?
It's not time wasting. I mean, they're busy.
Yeah.
Other people might think they're time wasting. They'll think they're not interested.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had couples tell me this. Walk up to their introverted husband and say, "Look, this is causing a problem. We need to talk about it. It's affecting our relationship." And the introverted husband says, and then walks off. And she thinks, "That's it. I'm out of here. He doesn't care."
Yeah. He's not talking to me.
Come back hours later or a couple of days later and say, "You're right about that." And she says, "What do you mean? About what?" "Well, it is affecting our relationship. We really do need to talk about it." Now, she thought the conversation was over 2 days ago.
Correct.
But for him, it's been going around in his head ever since, but he's not going to speak until he has worked out what's the right thing to say.
Okay, so now that we've got introversion, extroversion, and I'm guessing that if I'm speaking to a group of people, I will probably notice, let me just turn that off for a second. I will probably notice that the person that will raise their hand and want to ask or answer the question is probably an extrovert.
Yeah.
And the person who just sits, in most cases, and the person who's sitting there maybe nodding their head and kind of like looking up and gazing, and I'm thinking, this person's not interested. They don't really care, but they're actually probably more in tune because they're revolving.
They're busy listening to what you're saying and processing that, whereas the extrovert very often is putting their hand up and speaking and not necessarily tuned into what you're saying. Yeah.
See, I've got a message up here from Kookaburra, and she says, when there's a full conversation, I find that I have to say something to fill the void. Let me just bring that to the top. Yeah, that's what she says.
That's typical extroverted behaviour, because the introverts don't mind the quiet. Now, by the way, I should tell you, when you get to midlife, extroverts are looking for a bit of peace and quiet too, especially if you've had children, because children demand so much of your energy. And so extroverts will be going off looking for time alone, doing meditation or whatever.
Well, my father, I would say, my father is a classic. I've always known him to be active out there, wanting to get up and speak to people. He was the classic extrovert. But now in his later years, he's 91 now. He just wants peace and quiet. He wants the TV low down. He wants people. He doesn't like screaming kids. He doesn't want any of that to happen. So is that him now moving from his extroversion type just to his inner self? That's where he gets his energy from, is what you're saying.
Yeah, and you don't lose the extroversion, but you don't need the big crowds anymore as you get older. You could be happy to talk to one person or two or three people, just your family, and not necessarily having big crowds. Whereas a young extrovert, often they're out at parties, they're out at a concert somewhere, Easter show, anywhere where there's lots of people.
All right, let's have a look at the next lot of types. So we've got the E and the I. Now, this one here, talk me through this. How do we perceive information?
Perceive information. So how does our brain take in information? What does it pay attention to? Mm-hmm. So if you're looking at a scenery, or you're looking at data or information, or you're reading a book, what does your brain pay attention to? And so Jung talked about sensing as paying attention to the facts and the details, and whatever you can pick up through your senses. So what you see, touch, taste, hear, and smell, and they're good at that, and they remember it. Now, some of them have short-term memory. It depends on the combination of letters. Some of them are really good on short-term memory. They'll be able to tell you what you said last week, word for word. Right? They'll remember words to songs, word for word. Now, some people have long-term memory, and they will remember, like, who were the kids at their 5th birthday party and what presents did they give them. It's just extraordinary memory. Wow. And so in an organisation, they're very valuable, because when people are coming up with ideas, they'll say, well, hang on a minute, in 1987 we tried that and this is what happened. So you've got... So it's about gathering information through your senses, in some cases remembering it over a long time, sometimes over a short time. And what else does it say? So because they have that memory, they trust what they know from experience. Yeah. They don't trust new ideas. You come along and say, I've got this great new idea. We could change all this and this and this. And the first thing they're thinking of is, hang on a minute, how do we know it's going to work? Right. They don't want to do something just for the sake of changing. Your change agents very often are the intuitives, because their mind